Welcome to ILTV Insider, where we break down the biggest stories shaping Israel and the Middle East. I'm executive editor Maayan Hoffman, and today we're diving into one of the most explosive questions in Israeli politics. Will Israel apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? It's been nearly 4 weeks since former U.S. President Donald Trump said he'd give an answer on whether he supports this move. Could we be on the verge of a historic shift? And if so, what does it mean for Israel, the Palestinians, and the wider region? Would this be a game changer for security and stability, or a step toward global backlash? And why are Christian conservatives and Republicans in the U.S. rallying behind the idea? To debate this topic, we have an expert team. Former AP Middle East, Africa, and Caribbean Chief Editor Dan Perry, and journalist and blogger Malka Fleischer. So I think it's time to get started. This is for sure going to be an interesting debate, and we do need to start with what I just mentioned, that U.S. President Donald Trump said almost 4 weeks ago that sometime within the next month we would have an answer on the administration's stance as to whether or not we would have the green light from the United States to annex Judea and Samaria. First of all, I need to ask, do you think he's going to say yes, Dan?
I suspect he will, because he seems to be inclined to, if anything, outflank Netanyahu from the right. He seems to want to help Netanyahu's coalition survive, and this will have that effect. And he also seems inclined to say things that break dramatically with U.S. policy and tradition and the long-standing positions, because he's generally inclined to project the image of a person who wants to burn down the global liberal order that he's inherited, and it's quite a break from everything that preceded, not only on the issue of Israel-Palestine, but everything up to and including the transatlantic alliance. There's something else, though. Trump seems perfectly willing to say things that will be seen by much of the audience as absurd, reckless, and even factually incorrect, in cases where I think he knows all that, if taken literally, is actually true. I'm starting to accept that he's not ignorant and he's not crazy, but he's constantly negotiating. And he believes that in saying something that is way to the right, or maybe to the left, of standard positions, he's enlarging the window of discussion, maybe aiming towards something in the middle. So I don't think he's going to attack Denmark to seize Greenland, or occupy the Panama Canal, or annex Canada. And I don't think he wants to send the Marines to Judea and kick out the Palestinians so he can build magnificent resorts. So much of it is talk. And given that all the things that I've just said he said, and let's not even get into what he said about Ukraine starting the war just a few days ago, it's all so outrageously nonsensical.
So,
but some of it may be useful, and I think we may have that in the West Bank also.
Okay, so I want to take it over to you, because you live actually in Judea and Samaria. You live in the West Bank in Efrat. And I'm going to put words in your mouth here, Malka, but I'm assuming that you believe that Trump is going to side on the side of sovereignty over these areas. So what does that mean for people like you that live in Judea and Samaria?
I mean, this is a historic opportunity moment. The fact that we have a president in the United States, I mean, I happen to think that Israel should make its own sovereign decisions without necessarily always considering what the international community thinks. It happens to be that our friend, the United States, is all the way behind us. The doors have been kicked wide open. Israel's being given a green light for basically anything that it wants to do. And I think that this is really Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's moment to either miss an opportunity or to build a legacy. For us in Judea and Samaria, this would be a massive cause for celebration to normalize the communities in Judea and Samaria. I mean, we're constantly sidelined as if we're this like addendum to the state of Israel. There's like the state of Israel, and then if we want to be like generous with ourselves, so we'll like tack on Judea and Samaria. But Judea and Samaria is the Israel. It's the most Israel part of Israel. For hundreds and thousands of years, people have been telling their children the stories of what happens when we are on our land in these places. I love Tel Aviv, but Tel Aviv is not in those stories, right? It's not the story of the Jewish people of Tel Aviv. It's the story of the Jewish people in Beit El, the story of the Jewish people in Hebron. the Jewish people in Jerusalem.
I mean, well, some people argue that effectively we already have sovereignty over these areas. I mean, everybody is living relatively freely. You drive on the same streets. You have some protection by the IDF. People living in Judea, Samaria. You know, I was meeting with the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, yesterday, and one of these things he actually said was de facto for the last 2 years, they've been building roads, building houses, building up the communities. So does anything effectively change? Like, why do we need to say, oh, we have applied sovereignty?
Lots of things will change. First of all, it's honest. It's the truth. And if we've made any mistake, that's like maybe our biggest mistake that Israel has made over the last almost 60 years, it's not being honest about who we are, what's ours, and what our rights are. So just being honest by itself will change things. It'll be healthy. It's the right thing to do. And I think that what's happening in the world is a shift towards truth, even if it is sharp, edgy, even if it is painful.
Okay, but I have to stop you for a second because there are 2 million Palestinians living in Judea and Samaria. You've got Area 8. How many are living there?
2.7 million.
2.7 million. So
According
closer
to
to
their
3,
estimates, right.
Between 2 and 3 million Palestinians living in these areas, areas A and areas B. You're in Area C. Dan, I mean, is this talk to each other because I don't understand. This is great for the Jews. What happens to the Palestinians?
Look, I think everything Malka said is true, but the conclusion, my conclusion, would be very different.
So what's your conclusion?
What would change for the Jews in Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the West Bank? Nothing. Because they're Israeli citizens and they'll continue to be Israeli citizens. Right now they have all the rights of Israeli citizens. They'll continue to have those rights. If Israel really annexes the entire territory of the West Bank, what will change is life of the Palestinians, who, theoretically, if it becomes part of Israel, would cease to be second-class residents. If it really annexes the territories and wishes to continue being a democracy in any way at all, it would have to extend the right of citizenship to the Palestinians. Now look, it's true, Malka, you're right, that given the fact that we no longer have the classic paradigm of the U.S. reining in the right-wing excesses of Israel, and Israel can do whatever it wants, I think it kind of can. The question becomes not what you can do, but what it is wise to do. Now zoom out just for a second and understand this. Right-wing Israel wants not just the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, but also Gaza. And with Trump in power, who knows, maybe he can have Gaza. This is the classic Holy Land map. This is the famous land between the river and the sea, most of whose chanters don't even know what the river is or the sea is. But there is a river and there is a sea, and that's the entire land between them. It has 15 million people, equally divided right now between Jews and Arabs.
Equally divided?
It's about 7.5 million each. Absolutely. Now the issue is that the Arabs of Gaza and the Arabs of the West Bank don't have the right to vote in Israel. That's 40% of that territory. If you take Gaza out of the equation, it looks less undemocratic, but the almost 3 million Palestinians of the West Bank are about a quarter of the territory of the population of West Bank plus Israel. If they don't have the right to vote, that is not a democracy. Now, you can say it doesn't matter. I think it would matter in the world and for Israel's prosperity if it was no longer perceived to be a democracy.
Respond to that.
I think that you are envisioning Israel through such a lens of an outsider. It is surprising to me how you can talk about, well, you know, if we bring in all these people, well, we have to, you know, give them all equality, as if like the whole Arab world is so filled with equality, and so Israel also has to.
Malcolm, my term of reference is not the Arab world, but the democratic one.
So what you're looking for is Israel to be a mini.
Be part of the democratic world.
Is to be a mini America, not part of the democratic world.
Part of the democratic world, like Japan, like Australia, like Latvia. None of it is a mini America.
There are many countries throughout the world that show preference to their ethnicity. Israel is a small ethnic minority protectorate. I promise you that the ancestors who came over here from Europe after the Holocaust, and the people who held on with their fingernails for 10 generations from the Hasidic Aliyah, were not thinking to themselves, we're going to go to the land of Israel and we're going to half starve to death and we're going to drain the swamps so that we can build an equality state.
I'll tell you.
Excuse me. I said very quietly while you spoke. They came to Israel to build a Jewish state. Here we have, within this state, a Palestinian Authority, which is the most corrupt, bloated propaganda machine in this whole region. It teaches its children, it teaches its children to hate. It teaches its children to kill. It takes its tax money and pays people who attack Jewish people. The only country around here who can manage this situation and has rights to manage this situation is the state of Israel. The people here in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria, the Arabs in Gaza and Judea and Samaria, so many of them have said, we have spoken to them personally, because in Judea and Samaria, we actually live with Arabs. You guys live like kind of disconnected. You live in Tel Aviv. You don't have really interaction with them. We have real interaction with them.
At some point, I'll have to reply.
Okay, good. They say, just give us some residency, just give us rights, just give us respect. Even the United States has a place, Puerto Rico, in which people have some representation. They certainly have civil rights, but they are not considered equal citizens of the United States.
But Malka, I have to stop you because the reality is, and I want you to respond to this, Dan, because let's say everything you say is correct. And by the way, a lot of it is. But ultimately, we're living where we have been at war for 16, 17 months. And while Israel has done everything probably as ethically and as carefully as possible, we're already receiving international condemnation just for defending ourselves. So what happens if we declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? Couldn't we become a pariah state for real and actually not be able to interact with the rest of the world?
I think if Israel annexes the territories, makes them officially part of Israel, and doesn't give the Palestinians the right for citizenship and not residency, and a vote for the parliament and therefore government of the country that governs them, it will cease to be democracy and will soon get South Africa treatment. And I'm not indifferent to what that means for a country that is as small as Israel and as dependent on exports as Israel, and as dependent on U.S. assistance, which might not always be run by Trump, as Israel. Now, to Malka's points, yes, when you say you don't want to be a mini-American that is not a nation state, I get that. You want Israel to be a nation state of the Jewish people. The world has nation states, but for them to function properly while giving preference to the dominant ethnicity, that ethnicity has to have a serious majority. Romania, where I lived, is a nation state that gives priority to the Romanian ethnicity. But the Romanians are 75 to 80% of their own country. There's Hungarians, big minority. There's Roma/Gypsy, significant minority. There's a few Jews still left. They consider themselves not Romanians. There's German Romanians. One was just president, but the Romanians have a huge majority. That is the only way this works for nation states. Under your vision, where Israel includes the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria, and it has barely 50% Jews, and the Arabs suffice with residency, that is not a nation state that can work. Israel will be a pariah. And the question is whether you're okay with Israel being a pariah because you have a bigger mission. And I believe that the right, in particular the religious right, they think God will take care of it somehow.
Well, and maybe it will. I mean, I do have to say that, in the end of the day, we said the U.S. Embassy, when it moves, we thought we were going to be at World War III, and we didn't have World War III when the U.S. moved.
By the way, I
embassy.
didn't.
In fact, we haven't had World War III for any of it. We haven't had World War III over Gaza. And we're not going to have World War III over Judea and Samaria, because a magical thing happens when the Jewish people are honest and truthful. Everyone goes, whoa, look at that. That's honest and true. Look at Gaza.
And strong.
We cannot have another Gaza in Judea and Samaria. And I'll tell you something more about Gaza.
Gaza even run by Hamas. I mean, that is intolerable as well.
Oh, but under your theory of Judea and Samaria, all the people who are there are like a totally different thing.
My theory is that Israel needs to somehow work out where it places its people and where it wants to have official annexation, such as to enable a future, at least, partition, where it partitions itself from the bulk of the 5 to 6 million Palestinians who live in West Bank and Gaza, or soon will. Now,
could Israel be happy with, or the right-wing community or the community that wants sovereignty, could it be happy with annexing just Area C, just the area where currently Jews live? Or could that set us up for a problem, because once you annex, you're not going to be able to annex anymore?
Any piece of truth is a good piece of truth, but only giving a piece of truth is not truthful. So we have to start to speak with a clear message, which is that the land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people. It happens to be that amongst the beautiful citizenship-wanting people that my friend is recommending, have to be given citizenship, are millions of people who want the death. Don't interrupt me.
I'm recommending non-annexation,
who want
not
the
citizenship.
death and destruction of Jews. Now, we have to zoom out and understand that we are in a big Arab region of 22 Arab countries. So the people who find themselves in the land of the Jewish people, in the land of Israel, they should be given a choice. They have a right to make a decision. The decision is, do you want to live peacefully with the Jewish state and accept that there is one teensy-weensy little Jewish state in the Middle East, or do you want to find your manifest destiny somewhere else? There is no room here in this land, and the Gaza war should have proven it more than anything else, that there is no room in this land for anyone who wants to destroy the Jewish nation or who wants to attack Jewish people.
How is it a Jewish nation?
No.
How is it a Jewish nation if it doesn't have a Jewish majority? What are you going to do if they say, sure, we accept it, and then vote to change the name of the country to Palestine, which is what will happen?
The first thing that you have to understand is that this is a Jewish state. Again, you seem to think that the very idea of a Jewish state is anathema.
No, I don't. Malka, don't put words in my mouth. I'm saying you can't have a Jewish state with a Jewish minority. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And under your apocalyptic vision,
which is why
which will be a forever war, many of the Jews, all of them that are responsible for Startup Nation and Israel's prosperity, will gradually leave. And you'll have a Jewish minority that is mostly religious in constant friction with the Palestinians. The only reason that people are going to leave here is the only reason that these Startup Nation people will leave here if they get the sense that Israel is a weak milquetoast country. When Israel is a strong country which stands up for its rights, I live among them, and that's not the only reason. The people who will leave are the people who realize that there's no fight to be had with the Jewish people. That all these years in which we've been fighting the Jewish people and trying to destroy the state of Israel, that is all worthless. And what we have to do is get out of here, and they will move to other countries.
I have to ask the question.
Can I answer your previous question about the partial annexation?
Because
that's probably the realistic scenario.
Okay.
Annexing the entire West Bank and Gaza is recklessly idiotic. It will lead us into a demographic disaster. So the rational right just wants to annex the areas close to the border where not all but most of the settlers live. I don't have a very strong argument against that because, yes, it is honest. The idea that Israel is building towns for Israeli Jews, basically, on territory that it officially doesn't claim and that it officially doesn't recognize as Israel is without equal in a post-colonial era.
Dan,
hold on,
what you were
Malka,
saying
please.
Malka, please let him finish.
It is really dishonest, and therefore fixing it seems like the right thing. I am not sure that it's worth the diplomatic price that Israel would pay, but I suspect that if given the right by Trump to annex whatever parts of the West Bank he wants, Netanyahu, who is, unlike Trump, he has to do what makes sense, he'll throw his coalition a bone and try to annex, for example, the Etzion bloc and the area around Elkanah in the Western West Bank, and that'll be seen as a big achievement. It won't be as much as what my friend Malka may want, but it'll be seen as a step in the right direction, and I do admit, it would be honest. It risks inflaming the Palestinians, but you're right, the Jerusalem thing didn't, maybe this also will pass.
Everything risks inflaming the Palestinians, and what you're advocating is allowing Gaza to reform itself. What you are advocating
Please don't put words in my mouth.
Judea and Samaria,
I didn't advocate any of that.
Which largely supports
I will
Hamas
advocate for what I advocate.
To build itself
No,
a
actually,
state and to live
I have
as
to
a
say, what I
terrorist
heard
state
you
on our
advocate
borders.
for is to be able to be honest and be able to take over the areas where Jews are currently living, the majority of Jews in Judea and Samaria, if there's going to be an annexation, and not yet
those areas that Israel clearly
has
has no intention of ever relinquishing. However, it would be far better karma and far more correct diplomatically to annex those areas in the context of an overall deal with the Palestinians,
right,
which
but the
probably,
reality
by the way,
is, Dan,
does need to be with the Palestinian Authority backed by the Arab
except
League.
the reality is that we all know that we're quite far from that. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I want everybody to have a chance to be able to respond here. So give us some final sentiments. You know, here we are. Again, we're probably a week out from getting this answer from Donald Trump. So next week, this is going to potentially be a reality for the Israeli government and the Israeli people to potentially decide. Malka, if you could give one message as to why, because your estimation, we should exert sovereignty over all of Judea, Samaria. Let's talk about Gaza another time. Judea and Samaria. Tell us in 1 minute, in literally 1 minute, why we should do it.
The reason we should apply sovereignty is because this is our reclamation of our land. This is not taking something that doesn't belong to us. This is taking something that belongs to us and restoring justice to this area. It means removing the horrible overlords which destroy moderacy. I guess, is that a word?
I don't think so, but we'll go with it.
Which have their thumb on the heads of moderate Arabs, which destroy peace in this region. It means putting Israeli sovereignty, the light of freedom and hope and liberty, in its rightful place. And the rest of the Arab world will only respect us for it. The international community will only respect us for it, and we'll only respect ourselves for it.
Dan, in 45 seconds, respond.
There's no such thing as a God-given or universe-given right to certain people over a certain territory. The entire history of the world is migration and conquest, and countries were formed by a force of arms, essentially. They do this generally, if they're successful, they do this in a way that is engineered to work. And a full annexation of the West Bank is engineered to turn Israel into a non-Jewish, binational state that will begin the road to collapse. A partial annexation might make some sense of the areas currently occupied by Jews close to the border, creating a map one can live with. I would rather do that in a diplomatic process. I haven't given up on the notion of trying to come to an accommodation with the Arab world. Israel can have such a great future if it is reasonable at how it comports itself. And being driven by reveries of God-given rights on the entire territory and indifference to what will happen if Israel becomes something akin to apartheid South Africa, with some people having different levels of rights, that is the road to hell, basically.
So I'm going to receive the wrath of the production staff if we don't wrap this up. So I really want to thank you both so much for being here. Certainly we will revisit the subject as we continue through the process and see both what Trump and the Israeli government decides to do. I want to thank you so much, and thank you all of our viewers for being here tonight. For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at ILTV.tv. Thanks for watching Insider. Have a safe and pleasant evening.